Hello and welcome to the Retrosaurus podcast. I am your host, Retro Marky.
And my name's Dan.
Hey there, Dan.
Hello.
Dan, why have we changed our name to Retrosaurus?
Because we're two old dinosaurs, basically, and we thought the name suited better, slightly catchy.
Yeah, we were knocking these names around before, weren't we? And we came up with Retro Dads, and in hindsight...
It reminded us of cardigans, didn't it, really?
Yeah, and I think Retrosaurus is right. We're video game dinosaurs, and so that's why we changed our name. Sorry for the confusion, guys. We're going to not change it again, hopefully.
T-Rex with a joystick.
T-Rex with a joystick.
That's the image you want to hold in your...
So we're going to do something a little bit special today, aren't we?
We are. We're going to talk about a console system that never was. It's something that is particularly dear to my heart, and I think you're greatly interested in this as well.
Yeah, dear to my heart as well, but dearer to your heart, I would definitely admit.
It is the Konix Multisystem.
Yeah.
This was this was a thing that never was, and it broke my heart that it never made it out into the wild. And we want to talk about the story about that, don't we?
Definitely. Where to start with this background, I guess. So how did this all come about? So at that time, we were still playing 8-bit Commodore 64 mostly, and going to the arcades, playing Space Harrier, Outrun, all the Atari games we mentioned. Yeah, and then suddenly, out of the blue...
In that time, there was it was the twilight zone between 8-bit and 16-bit. So we were edging from 8-bit systems that could almost play arcade quality. Well, couldn't play arcade quality, but they had this kind of vague semblance of the games that we played in the arcade. I
would say what was happening was... the 8-bit versions of the arcade games were getting further and further away to the point of, I mean, I remember Paperboy on all the 8-bit systems. It was ridiculously bad.
Yeah,
like it's just getting to the point of just don't bother.
But the 16-bit systems offered hope.
They did indeed, and of course the Konix, well, mainly was a 16-bit system. We'll go into some of the hardware a little bit later.
Yeah. But at the time we had things like the Atari ST and the Amiga, I believe, had come out. These, it's worth keeping in mind, were massively expensive systems. So what kind of price was an Amiga A500?
The Amiga was $399.99, I seem to recall.
Recurring.
Yeah, and that's what I paid for mine, actually. But I did do some calculations earlier, and by today's numbers, that would be well over £1,000.
That's a huge amount of money for the wages people were taking home.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting era because we'd gone through the 8-bit era.
Yeah.
And one of the things about 8-bit computing that we've talked about was there was a conversation that was had between father and son. But deep down the subtext was this was something to play games on. Both father and son knew that, but there had to be this false pretense around home computing being a thing, an intellectual endeavour, which it probably was for a few people, but for a lot of kids, actually, it was just a route to get a C15 in the cassette deck with a game on it.
Basically, if we said educational, we had a much better chance of getting it.
Yes.
It was educational, and you could play games, Dad.
Yeah.
But you did mention, actually, was it in podcast 1 that your dad probably bought the Electron for Elite, so...
I don't know.
The game's going on in both directions.
I'm sure he disputes it. And don't get me wrong, I mean, we did...
both you and I did some programming, and we did actually do quite a bit of stuff like that. But we realised it was more fun to play the games, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly that. But I think there comes the threshold. And I think £400 back in the late 80s was a step too far to be able to make that justification that it's educational stroke gaming, when deep down you know a lot of it was about gaming. So consoles were really starting to come to the fore then.
And of course, I think because we're talking about a British cultural background for us, the idea of a console, I mean, you had the NES out in the States and Japan, and they were pretty big over there, but the NES, I remember the NES being in Boots, along with...
I do as well.
Yeah. With
and the Master System.
Yeah, with the 8-bit computers. And it didn't interest me at all. I just thought, that looks like a toy. And I saw the price of the games. The cartridges were like £40 each, and we were paying, £10, even $3. And it didn't interest me at all at that time. So consoles were not quite into our mindset, into the living room yet, were they?
That's right.
And so what happened from there? So I'm interested to know, what was the story? How did this, because we didn't have the internet back then, obviously, how did the Konix even get into our heads, or mainly into yours?
Well, that takes me back to one of your YouTube videos where you explain to the younger audience what a magazine is. So for us...
That's a popular video, that one, yeah.
We used to go out and buy computing magazines that would cover the technology and games and things like that. So for Commodore 64, it was Zap 64.
Absolutely.
But there were other magazines. Ace Magazine was one of my magazines, used to cover consoles, console hardware and gaming and developments. And so the announcement about the Konix Multisystem, this controller we're going to go into, I think it was predominantly from that, and probably Computer Weekly and things like that.
Yeah.
Suddenly articles started springing up about something that was quite miraculous. Even now, if we saw something like this, we'd be amazed at the concept.
So we're talking, just to get this into perspective, so we're talking what, 1988?
Around 88.
Around 88. Because the Amiga 500, I think, released around 88. I'm not sure if that was in Britain yet. It might have been the end of 88. But the Amiga and ST were starting to come into the UK. The other thing is, I did want to mention that we'd never seen a jump before in bit systems. So now we all know, okay, it's gone from 16 to 32, roughly what that means to the power of the system. Back then, we could only imagine what 16-bit really meant.
Yeah.
Because we'd never seen a jump before. So anyway, should we go on to what was the Konix basically?
Well, Konix is a company based in Wales, headed up by a guy called Wyn Holloway.
Yep.
Wyn Holloway had brought to market some really interesting joysticks. So Konix Navigator and the Speed King. And I remember I had one of these. It was an ergonomic design, meaning it fitted the palm of your hand and was built. Basically, it was a casing with a joystick and some micro switches in it, but it was really tactile. It was
It had
a
the
great
trigger
joystick
underneath, which is unusual, wasn't it?
Yeah, they made some great joysticks, and as I understand it, Konix had come up with this idea of a more complex controller that was a multi-controller.
Okay, so it wasn't actually a system at that time. Konix were just extending their joysticks into something more complex.
That was the initial stage where they realised they could have a system that looked like... effectively, it was a steering wheel controller, stroke flight yoke, stroke motorcycle controller, all in one. And they were obviously aiming for something here, and that's to bring the arcade experience of that kind of dedicated console feel that we talked about, the likes of Atari and what have you, spent a lot of money on that, into your home in a versatile way.
I'm already, as soon as you start saying these words, I'm thinking Space Harrier, Outrun, Super, what was it called? Super Hang-On.
Super this and Super that.
Super Duper Hang-On and etc. But so we had that whole era of arcade systems with moving chairs and steering wheels, and like you said,
So this controller that Konix had come up with, they very quickly realised it would be an amazing platform to stick console hardware in and have it as a system in its own right. So the Konix Multisystem concept was then born, that there would be a gaming hardware platform fused into this amazing controller. So to try and describe what the Konix Multisystem looks like, Google it, because I'm not, only joking. So imagine a kind of U-shaped toilet seat thing with a steering column that rises out from the centre, and at the end of that, the idea was you'd have a steering wheel, but you could change the steering wheel and peel off the steering wheel, and there'd be a flight yoke underneath, and then also you could twist the handlebars into this motorcycle controller shape, and it would have a solenoid underneath it that would allow it to vibrate and give you that kind of tactile feedback.
That's very ahead of its time then, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And you're sitting at home reading Ace Magazine, you've got a Commodore 64 that you've been playing for 4 or 5 years or whatever.
It's still good, but we're starting to think...
we're stretching that. And all of a sudden you could have this. Wow. So some other important concepts that started coming out about this mystery games console. And one of the things that was massively unique, it had a light gun, which is not the unique thing, but it also had the concept of a movable chair.
Yes, that was a huge part of it,
So it's really worth mentioning that when we went into the arcades and we saw Space Harrier, we saw Outrun and games like that where you could get in and turn the controller and you'd be thrown about. It became evident they were proposing on having an affordable version of that for home. Hence, that suddenly became absolutely unique worldwide, I'd say.
And you know what? It wasn't just that. The price of it was remarkable. They were going to do that for around about, what, £200? That's half the cost of the Amiga at the time. And probably 5% of the cost of the Space Harrier coin-op. I mean, imagine, the ripples and waves they're going to cause by getting a system like that into the home.
I mean, I don't know what the price breakdown. I definitely know that the console itself was a couple of £100. What the chair would have cost was apparently going to be relatively low cost. Alas, we'll never know, unfortunately.
Yes, of course. So we've spoken about the fact that we had this controller basically that could be used for driving games and could be modified. had vibration, and there was a chair and things like that threw you around the room. So what was actually inside the guts of the machine itself?
So the proposal around this was to fuse the controller, the unit controller, with Flare 1 hardware. So the Flare 1 system was originally proposed as a Z80 system, which was an 8-bit system that was touted to have the processing capabilities of a 16-bit system.
That's pretty remarkable.
So with some custom blitter capability for shifting things around in memory and what have you. However, that was the original proposal. My understanding was Konix wanted to take it into the 16-bit arena, and I think that made sense at the time.
Yeah, you know what? I think part of that's a marketing thing, because 16-bit was where all of us were looking for anything new and exciting.
Absolutely.
I think that was the right idea. So it became an 8086, didn't it, I think?
That's right. I think the development box was at an 8080, which ran about a quarter of the speed of the 8086.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
Apparently so. But yeah, they took it into 16-bit territory. So in terms of memory, 128K, I think, was development box, and that was the original proposal, but that soon ramped up to 256K, which was a lot of memory, considering a lot of 8 bits were, 32 or 64K.
And it was a console, so there's no operating system, anything like that. I mean, the Amiga was 512 at that time, K. Pretty much standard, but of course that's got an operating system and a lot more going on. So
I think that's a brilliant point. Yeah. So there were also proposals for having RAM expansion on it, and RAM cost at the time was astronomical. My understanding in terms of the hardware costs, the RAM was a huge part of that, even more so I've read than some of the other custom chips that they had on the system, including one of the ASICs. So video, in terms of the video capabilities, I think it was 4,096 colours to match the Amiga.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive as well, isn't it, for the
and
time?
It had 3 display modes that were available at the time. So we had two 16-colour modes, one of which, the high-resolution one, was as high as 512 by 200, and then the other was 256 by 200. So there was also a 256-colour mode at 256 by 200, which you think at the time was actually, for something that was going to be chucking sprites around and what have you, was
that's pretty impressive, I would say. Yeah, that's more or less in the territory with... I mean, I can't imagine a game on the Konix and the Amiga, the two versions being very different at all.
Yeah. So
if anything, the Konix, I think, with the blitter and all the other custom hardware, is probably slightly faster and better than the Amiga in that sense. But
that's exactly what I've read. This was a thing that was capable, especially in terms of gaming, of edging those very expensive systems out of the market, and probably being a lot more fun to play as an all-round experience. I still have my Acorn Electron playing Elite as well at the time, as well as the Commodore 64. So what kind of colours did we get on screen for those systems?
So the Acorn Electron, you had different modes, didn't you? You did quite a high resolution mode. Was it 512 or 640? It wasn't usable for games, but
no.
It could do an 80-column black and white, but for games...
Everything was mode 2, wasn't it?
Normally mode 2, I think. I think 4 colours, maybe?
Something like that,
yeah. But I remember, like, the Acorn Electron and the BBC Micro, the biggest problems were you had these fancy graphic modes, but the amount of memory they ate, some of them ate 20K.
Right.
Before you even started.
Yeah.
So what happened was you got games with very few colours. So there was more memory left for the actual programs
Elite
themselves.
Was completely monochrome for the Electron, wasn't it?
And the other thing interesting about that, the Beeb one did have a colour graphic below the display, although the main display, like the Electron, was black and white.
Yeah.
That's because you could split the screen into 2 different graphic modes.
That's amazing, isn't it, really? Yeah. I mean, we could have another conversation about that, and weeping about how the Electron didn't have mode 7 is another conversation. So, those were the video capabilities, and it does sound that was an advancement, and by comparison, that's kind of the same as the SNES type graphics resolution that you would see for games.
It sounds like the SNES kind of resolution, but you know what? The way you're talking, it makes me think of Neo Geo. This idea that the graphics hardware is designed not for high resolution 80-column text modes, which you use on things like CPM or on the Amiga for your workbench and your operating system. Because it's a game system, resolution doesn't need to be that high. You just need a lot of colours and sprites that are really smooth, 60 frames a second. That's all you need.
Yeah, and then you're immersed into the experience. And actually, I mean, we'll go on to say about this, is the experience of the Konix Multisystem isn't actually beyond people's grasp today.
I mean, interestingly, just to back up your last point as well, do you remember you were talking about Resident Evil, and you were saying that on VR the resolution's not as high, well, it's not the highest resolution game out there.
And it makes no difference.
It doesn't make a difference because the game's immersive.
Yeah.
And I think we always come back to this conversation with so many other gamers as well. It's all about gameplay and experience and immersion.
It's everything in totality, and that was the thing about the Konix. With the controller, they were trying to give you an experience. So yeah,
good segue there. I like that.
In terms of other technical specs, CPU, like you said, it was 8086 was running at about 6 megahertz, which I think is one less than the Amiga, is it?
Yeah, it is just, yeah.
Yeah, but overall capabilities, I think, compensated for that. The storage of the thing was originally conceived to be cartridge, but the costs of that were perceived to be astronomical.
Yes.
So they went to 3.5-inch floppy, which was standard at the time, but that would have probably needed a lot of
I can tell you an interesting little nugget of wisdom. To get
give me an anecdote.
You need to make at least 10,000 cartridges. Nobody at that time would produce anything less. And they weren't cheap either. No. So floppy disk, on the other hand, cheap as chips.
Exactly. Yeah. So that made an awful lot of sense. The other thing, audio on there, it was apparently purported to be able to support up to 25 channels of sound, but typically 8 expected in a game.
That's still double the Amiga.
It is an astronomical number of channels, considering where we had come from.
Yes.
We had the Acorn Electron with 3 channels where we'd only play one at a time, BBC with 3, the SID chip was 3-channel.
I know, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
So, you know, the specs were looking really good, and it had this custom ASIC. Apparently they fused 4 of the chips into a single slipstream ASIC that was relatively
I'm trying to think what that acronym stands for. It's something integrated circuit, isn't
Application specific integrated circuit.
There we go. Which basically means it's a huge chip with lots of pinouts. I think it was 160 with everything combined into one chip.
Yeah, that's a pretty beefy product, and I think it showed some real balls by Konix to innovate, and you know, try and get a cost-effective system, but with some really decent internationally competitive specs.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The other thing I read about the sound chip was it was 14-bit, I think, which is, I mean, to put it in perspective, CD is 16-bit quality.
Wow.
So it wasn't far below that.
So you start taking a look at the picture. Remember, think back to the late 80s and what was about there. And then suddenly you pick up a magazine and you're starting to see pictures of games emerging, and you see this fantastic controller and these amazing specs. Your mind spins, and then they say, oh, by the way, 200 quid. And I'm thinking, I'm saving all my pocket money now, because that is something I've got to have, and I'll buy it myself. I don't have to have that argument with my dad about whether it was educational or not. It would be a premium game system for half the price of the Amiga that was kicking about at the moment. Do you ever wonder what it would be like to get your hands on one of those controllers?
Absolutely, yeah. I think, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later, weren't we, that I still think someone at some point is going to make 1 or 2 of them. Maybe not a load of them, but it's got to be possible to cobble something together pretty close to the original experience. So I'm going to show me something in your back garden.
I'm going to like this next bit. You remember that time you brought in a bit of hardware for your Neo Geo?
Oh yeah.
In the corner of the room, there's a bag over there. I've got a little surprise for you. Go and have a look.
Good God!
Live on the podcast.
Okay. What have you got in there?
What have I got in the bag?
Oh my God! No.
Yes. Not right. Just to explain, because this doesn't make for a good podcast. This is I've not got a Konix Multisystem. I would have loved a Konix Multisystem, but apparently there are none about whatsoever. But what Retro Marky has got his hands on at the moment is the nearest that you'll get to it. It's a Multisystem China game controller. So we'll get onto this later, but effectively the Konix Multisystem controller lived on, not the console part of it so much, but the controller lived on through a Chinese company that then sold it on as a joystick for IBM PCs. And I managed to pick one up from eBay.
Oh my God, it's unbelievable though. It looks exactly like it.
It does.
It's a slightly different colour.
The only thing is, so the Konix Multisystem was grey, and this thing is black, but it is exactly the same. It's got the flight yoke, it's got the steering wheel, it's got the handlebar controller. So
and it looks retro amazing.
It is absolutely retro amazing. Do you know how much I got that for?
I can't imagine.
I'm
in shock. I can't talk.
Let's play a little game. Now you understand why I wanted to have the podcast in this house today. So a little game. I saw it on eBay.
Yeah.
How much do you think I was willing to go up to?
I mean, I know you're nuts for the Konix.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you're going to say it's way lower than I imagine or way higher.
So my maximum price, what do you reckon?
Oh, the thing is, I know you love the Konix so much, you probably spend an absolute bomb.
Okay, so I would have probably gone
Hundreds,
to a couple of hundred.
I think a couple of hundred, more or less.
I picked it up. The auction ended at £31.
No
Yes.
way. Oh my god.
I don't know how many of these things, to be honest, are knocking about. Whether they're
That's
rare
got to be
or
a
not.
collector's item.
Well, I'm going to keep it. Well, I say I'm going to keep it as a collector's item. I've already got a converter cable to convert it to USB to see if I can attach it to a PC and get it up and running.
I mean, it looks fantastic as well. I mean, even if I'd buy one broken for 15-20 quid and just for the thing itself. I wouldn't care if it didn't work. It looks. And it's a Konix. It really is.
Exact. So if you were into the Konix, this little controller looks exactly the same.
I'm sure like things like the weight and the feel are pretty close to the original. Yeah. So it's as close as we're going to get to a non-existent gaming console, isn't it?
I know. We're gonna have to move on from this because
yes, we are.
That was a surprise. I thought you'd really like that.
Next week I'll tell you in the podcast what I thought the surprise was going to be, because I knew you had something up your sleeve. I could tell, but it wasn't that. That is, oh my god.
Is it better than you expected?
Way better.
Excellent. All right, okay. So anyway, so we've got this amazing concept for a controller.
Yeah.
And we've got these amazing hardware specs. We're really hyped about this.
Actually, we're pretty much good to go now. We've got the controller, we've got the hardware. What about the games?
What about the games? Exactly. I mean, what did you expect? What kind of games would you have liked to have seen?
Well, the thing is, with that controller, it lends itself to, I mean, it's a shame they didn't get on board with Sega in some ways. I know I keep saying these games again and again, but it's got the steering wheel for Outrun, it's got the ability to switch the steering wheel into something for games like Space Harrier, even the Atari games like Star Wars that we talked about, anything with cockpits, even things like Battle. I mean, all these coin-ops we've talked about that have any kind of experience beyond standing there with a joystick.
Yeah. So I've got to say, one of the things about it, not only did it have this fantastic controller, but there was also a joystick port. And I understand they were going to flog the thing with a Konix Navigator joystick. So you could have a mix of games on it, not just these steering wheel flight and bike games, but ordinary games as well.
They covered everything, didn't they? They thought of everything by the sounds of it.
I know. So I was really looking for games like that. And, just I wanted the depth of the kind of arcade quality games that were out there.
But not just the arcade ones. I'm also thinking, I mean, obviously it'd be amazing. And I think if you look at the advertising, the early advertising for the system, which I know you and I have many times, they were bringing out games that looked very, very much like Hang On, for example. Not Outrun exactly, but that kind of thing. Racing games, whether it be bike, car, plane. But the other thing was, of course, we had, at that time, home systems were really huge and continuing to be so. So I was also looking at, obviously keeping my eye on what was going on with. I didn't have the Amiga at this time, but I did get one not too long after. And of course, we were looking at games like Starglider. Sort of a spiritual successor to Elite. Not directly, but if you liked Elite, you were definitely going to look at games like Starglider.
Absolutely, and it was in development for
was it? Blimey.
It was, Starglider's Revenge, I seem to remember.
Yeah, which makes absolute sense, doesn't it?
Now, I don't know what they proposed to play it with. I always imagined that would be played with the flight yoke.
That's a good point, yeah.
There was also touted to be a helicopter controller add-on that they were going to do for it. I don't know which one they proposed, but, I mean, my mind was spinning. The thing about the system, not only did it have great graphical capabilities in terms of multiple colours on screen and what have you, it was also meant to be a good polygon shifter as well. So it should have attached itself quite nicely to a game like Starglider. Can you imagine Elite on that as well?
Yeah. Well, there was actually, was it Elite Frontier? Kind of a successor. That would have been perfect for a system like this.
Absolutely perfect.
And also, I think I've noticed a coincidence that a lot of games seem to be developed or partly developed on the Konix, ended up on the Amiga, or there were Amiga games already developed that looked like they were going onto the Konix.
Yeah.
So I think, although we're having to use our imagination, you can almost imagine a system as powerful, if not a bit more than the Amiga, inside something like a Space Harrier cockpit, with a bunch of amazing games.
So, what other games were out there? Hammer Fist was one, which was a platform-based game.
Just to put this into perspective, it wasn't just a Win Holloway Dream. I mean, System 3 were involved. Ocean were involved. Psygnosis, Even LucasArts, which makes me think...
Well, LucasArts were
Star Wars?
touted... Yeah, they were touted as distributors of the Konix Multisystem over in the States, and they probably would have tied a Star Wars game to it if they had done that. But
yeah, they'd have to, wouldn't they? Make perfect sense, yeah.
There are also some other great household names that I think were also involved.
Mm-hmm.
If you've been involved in the retro scene, everybody knows who Jeff Minter is.
Oh, of course,
and
Larmasoft. Yeah.
So he was linked. I remember when I was young, staring at Jeff Minter sitting in the Konix system chair, the power chair, holding the light gun, just thinking, I can't imagine what this is going to be like. What crazy ideas is he going to come up with? And
he would be the man for the job.
So
I do remember. I forgot about that advert. It was him, wasn't it, in the chair?
Yeah, there was a picture in Ace magazine of him sitting in the chair, long hair, looking cool.
One hand on the steering wheel, one hand, holding a gun.
Brilliant. So,
and actually, talking of Jeff Minter, sorry to interrupt, but
No, go
talking
ahead.
of Jeff Minter, I was going to jump in and say, both you and I have actually played a little bit of Attack of the Mutant Camels, was it, on the Konix?
Well, this is it. So how have we managed to play something on the Konix? I want to just bring this in. I always thought I was a complete Konix nut.
You were?
Yeah.
You were right, you were not.
I wasn't quite scrapbook nutty, but I had
No.
practically every bit
Just
of
Konix
information
nutty.
about it. Yeah. So I was absolutely delighted to find online a website called Konix Multisystem, all one word, .co.uk. It's a site that's been developed by a guy called Mark Campbell. And if you want to know the ins and outs of that system, whether it's technical specs, what the developers got up to, the history of Konix itself and its peripherals or anything associated with it, where it went to, and potentially why this thing never came out, this site is a must-visit site.
It is, yeah. I've looked at it myself. I think is this the one that's also got emulation?
That's right.
Yeah.
So he's worked with somebody called Savoury Snacks, I think the name is. Well, hopefully that's not his Christian name, but but they've put together this emulator, and it's absolutely stunning, and made it available with ROMs.
Yeah.
Now, as part of that, one of the ROMs is a playable demo of Attack of the Mutant Camels by
That's
Jeff
right,
Minter.
yeah.
So we've both seen this.
Yep.
And what are your thoughts on it?
It's awesome.
It is.
I mean,
really good.
it's typical. I mean, Jeff Minter is well known for making arcade-style games, and this is one of his classic ones from the 8-bit era as well. And it just feels like an arcade game. It's loud, it's fast. There's so many levels of parallax scrolling as well.
There's the
Huge
parallax
sprites,
scrolling,
yeah.
Crazy concept of these mutant camels
Yep.
stomping away. But I mean, one of the things that really, really smacked me in the face about it, and I'm sure you'll concur with this, the sound quality on that. The feeling I got from it, when you go in an arcade and you play a Williams game and it's got that really punchy in the face, bassy, guttural sound.
It's
and
almost like a lion growling at you. It's not a modest like, hey, come over here. It's like a in your face.
I know. And funnily enough, the Konix Multisystem sound, I was amazed at how gutsy it was.
It is, yeah.
I mean, on the one hand, he's got this range of arpeggiated music going along, and then he's got this kind of crazy sounds when you get hit and you crash the ship into the ground and everything. Amazing sound quality, absolutely amazing.
Is there any other games in development for the Konix that we've missed then?
There are a huge number of games, and like I say, if you go to that multisystem.co.uk site, you can find a list. There is rumour that The Last Ninja 2
Oh, right, yeah, of course.
was actually found for the console.
Ooh.
And then it has been seen running on the emulator, but it's not. Jeff Minter very kindly allowed Attack of the Mutant Camels to be distributed, which I think was a brilliant gesture by him.
That's so him as well, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was really cool.
Yeah.
But I don't think anything has been done in terms of releasing.
Mark Cale, isn't it, System 3? I think.
Yeah, so whatever happens there, I don't know if that's actually going to get out into the wild. It would be great if it did, but we'll have to see.
Is this a good time to talk about the possibility? Because one thing I keep thinking is it possible to make a Konix maybe now or soon, if we got enough emulation tools? Not that you and I could do it maybe at the moment, but is it out there? Do you think it's possible to resurrect something?
I suspect if we had a Kickstarter and there was enough money to fund the developer in order to get something up and running, you imagine if you could get hold of one of these MSC controllers and
That's
fuse
halfway
it,
there, isn't it, already? Stick
it in a Pi or something, Raspberry Pi or something in there, you might be able to get something Konix worthy up and running. Wouldn't that be fantastic? Wouldn't it be great if we could find more ROMs about this?
Yeah, it would, yeah.
I'd love to see it, and to to try and relive that moment.
I can't believe this thing I'm looking at, though. It's absolutely gorgeous, isn't it?
It is. But there is obviously a sad downside to this. I mean, we can't... Unfortunately, I could talk all day about this, but we're limited on time. So something happened to this, and it became evident to you and me that the console wasn't going to make it out. There were delays.
And then more delays and more rumours, and... You probably know the story better than me, but...
Effectively, the console never emerged, and it broke into the papers that Konix was struggling financially. My understanding is that they sold off a lot of their assets, intellectual assets even, in order to try and keep the project up and running. It's not as if they didn't try, but for some reason, in spite of the huge number of pre-orders for this system, because anticipation was high, it never made it. You had some figures?
I heard a software company in Germany pre-ordered, was it 10,000?
Yeah.
Which makes me think that's not that's not a pipe dream. That's
this is
real interest that's a lot of money.
Yep, and my understanding was also actually interest was so high that they didn't think they could ramp up the manufacturing that high, and they were going to have to restrict it to Europe and the UK in the first instance.
And when you've got companies like, System 3, Ocean, Psygnosis, I think, all the British ones, they're huge in themselves. LucasArts in America, they're not going to, you know what I mean?
It would have been an absolute... So something's happened here, and we may never know the true story about this ourselves.
We have speculated a little bit, haven't we? And I think there's a number of ways you can go on this. I can see, what I'm going to do is speculate a couple of things, but not accuse anybody of anything. I can see that, for one, the American biggies, Atari with the ST, Commodore with the Amiga, would be threatened by a machine that's half the price with the same spec, even more. And twice as fun. Then you've got the Japanese console market with Nintendo and Sega were huge at that time and starting to break into Europe and the UK. The Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive, I think, really were the beginnings of that, more than the earlier 8-bit systems. And I could also imagine the arcade manufacturers as well being threatened by... this is basically Space Harrier for so much less money in the home.
It was absolutely paradigm changing.
It was,
And you can see an awful lot of people who projected that they were going to have a certain amount of market share suddenly feeling very, very threatened about this. Whatever the story is, and the true story about this may never emerge out in public, whatever the story is, it was a huge loss to the UK, I think, also from getting a foothold in the console gaming industry. Now, UK has got a proud history of software development and has great stories to tell in terms of 8-bit home computing, but we never made it in the console sphere, did we?
No, unless you want to count the ill-fated Amstrad GX400, but that was just really an Amstrad computer.
I'm not counting it.
No, I'm not counting it either. So no, we have never made, unless we might count some Pong machines, but for the sake of argument, we've never made a console system.
A successful console system, and it's a real shame because that would have been a foothold into the industry that we could have then built on as a foundation stone. It would have been great for Wales because Konix were a Welsh company.
Absolutely.
And I can imagine Wynne would have probably carried on building that company there. But sadly, it was never to be. They sold off the controller idea to Multisystem China, which is the thing I've surprised you with today. Again, a lot of this information gleaned from the Konix Multisystem Co. UK site. The Flare 1 technology ended up being sold on to a gambling machine company called Bellfruit.
And the Flare 2 technology ended up in the Atari Jaguar. Kind of, not exactly a cousin, more of a third cousin removed, but I do feel there's a slight sort of feeling of Konix when I play the Atari Jaguar. And of course, the only two good games on it are Jeff Minter games.
Exactly.
Defender 2000 and Tempest 2000. So you might say it's a slight spiritual successor, but
we like to see it that way, that somehow it lived on. But other than that, it petered out. There were rumours that Wynne Holloway also went on to try and do some more console-like endeavours. But
what I don't understand, the thing that makes me slightly cynical about this whole story is that it was. We've analysed the console from the incredible idea of having a multi-controller to the guts of the system. And it ticks every single box I can think of. I can't find a weakness. No. It's got a floppy drive. It's got a blitter. Everything about it. It could kick the Amiga out of
beautiful sound.
Yeah, everything's right. The price is right. And
come on down.
How has it even if the Konix company ran out of money, I'm amazed and almost slightly suspicious that nobody came along and said, I'll tell you what, we'll buy that off you and we'll make it happen, we'll invest in it. Because these companies that were behind it, the software companies, were not small companies.
No.
And this wasn't some little pipe dream. This was very close to becoming, I mean, I've seen, and I'm sure you have as well, Dan, there are prototype videos and pictures of it. There are one or two physical versions kind of around. Although it's a non-existent console, it's not just something on paper. It really was very close to being released.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how it can just disappear.
I know.
To me, it's a bit like in the 80s saying electric cars, were existed but hidden from us.
Yeah.
And it almost feels that way. But
Almost
I don't want to say
conspiratorial. I never get to the intellectual argument at this because what happens is I think about it, then my heart aches and I cry. Yeah. Even to this day, I think it's quite sad. It was a shame. Konix was the thing that never really was. It is well worth going to the Konix Multisystem site, but also taking a look at some of the videos that are on YouTube about this and seeing what else is out on the internet.
And just to reiterate, just to make it super clear, you can very easily emulate this system and all the things we've been talking about on pretty low spec PC.
Exactly.
The download's tiny, a few hundred megabytes. All the ROMs are there that they've made available. I did it. There's no configuring. It's a piece of cake. You can do it in 5 minutes and experience what we've been talking about and get a flavour for it.
Yeah. So that is our story, I think, about the Konix Multisystem. We've probably got more to say about it sometime in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. But we wanted to do at least one special episode dedicated to it.
As a cathartic exercise. Yes.
The only console or system I know of that's never existed and is emulated. That shows how significant it was. The fact it's being emulated, even though it never actually made it to market.
Yes.
No other system's done that.
No, well done. That was fantastic.
Rest in peace, my friend. But I've got to say, this is a good close approximation. I can't wait to finish this podcast and have a bit of a tinker with that.
Have a fiddle.
I was going to say fiddle, but I thought you'd cut that.
Moving on, as a roundup, effectively, we always like to talk about what we've been playing with.
Yeah, because I have been playing quite a lot of 2 PC games. But I've been doing PvP with a mate of mine. I used to live in Barcelona, as you know, and one of my friends there still does. And believe it or not, I'm a huge fan of golf games. I absolutely love golf games, video, obviously.
Yep.
And we're playing a game called the Golf Club through PvP.
Okay.
And what we do is we put our Skypes on, put it on speaker, and we play couch play virtually, as close to what we used to do when we used to live in the same city. And it's fantastic fun. We have a chat, because it's golf, it's quite slow and easy. And we do a bit of a highly recommended game from Codemasters called Dirt Rally. There's not to be confused with Dirt Rally 3 and 4, which are arcadey. This is the last Codemasters game I think they made, actually, where it's a simulation of a rally car, so it's hard as nails, but it's so much fun.
Yeah.
And single player for myself. I finished Fear, finally. You know what, I'd forgotten how old school FPS is. The standard story wasn't 8 hours Call of Duty, 16, 17 hours.
Fair play.
I was almost getting annoyed though. I was like, oh, come on, I want it to end now. I'm not used to games being so long. Yep. So what about you, Dan? Have you been playing anything much recently?
A couple of things. Firstly, following on from our horror episode, I decided to dig out Alien Isolation and get a copy for the PlayStation 4. PlayStation 4 Retro Marquee is a new console.
Oh, is it? I never heard of that
that
one.
Modern people play. You must check it out sometime. So I've been playing that, which has got some interesting stuff. It's got a peek mode where the camera on the PlayStation 4 tracks your head.
Oh, that's
interesting. So as you hold on to the peek button and move around, then you can peek
I
by
must
actually
have a look
moving.
at this, yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is also it uses a microphone on the camera to pick up sounds. If you want it to, you don't have to have this, but effectively, if you make a loud sound whilst an enemy's around, you could get found out.
No. So if your kid's running all noisily and excited and slam the door,
you're in trouble.
Wow. Yeah. You know what, though? That sounds amazing. We should probably do a podcast or something about this in future because, believe it or not, the 8-bit NES, the original Nintendo Entertainment System, in Japan, had a microphone on the controller.
Wow.
For Zelda. And there was a bit in Zelda in the Japanese version where it gave you a clue, and I think you had to blow or whisper something. on the 8-bit system as well. I know the Wii, one of the Wii... Which one was
on
it?
earth did they do that?
One of the modern ones you blow into, don't you? What am I thinking of?
I think that's the Wii U, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you could blow into that and sell that.
Yeah.
This is getting quite bizarre conversation.
Yeah, suck and blow games. So Alien 4 Isolation, I've been playing a bit of that still, which I think is amazing. That's about 4 years old now. The other one that slightly more retro was Metroid Other M. We've just got that in the house.
You know what? It's not...
I'm blown
it's
away
not
by
that bad.
I love it.
It's. I know it's different.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the 2D Metroid. It's not your classic Metroid Prime first-person shooter. But it's not. I mean, it's not bad at all. It's not maybe my favourite Metroid, but
I love it. I'm really enamoured with it. So me and the kids are playing that one at the moment. So there we go. That's all I've got to say this week. What about yourself? Anything else?
Oh, actually, no. Just a bit of, I suppose, not really retro news, but just to sort of promote myself a little bit. Doing a lot of Commodore 64 and BBC Micro stuff recently on my channel. If anyone's interested in that, I've been checking out coprocessor Raspberry Pi on the Master and the Beeb standard, switchable operating systems. And my Commodore 64s, I had to have a little bit of a rest. I went through a phase where I managed to blow 2 64s, the PLAs probably, and my Ultimate 2, my all-time favourite device. And I also bricked my 64 Reloaded. So I've been repairing, getting all those back up to working, and they're all on my channel at the moment. So quite a lot of retro hardware stuff at the moment. Right. That's about it for now.
Okay, good. I think we're done for this week, aren't we then?
We are indeed. I mean, we normally mention what we're going to do in the next podcast, but we've got so many topics going around our heads that we're fighting over what to do next. So we're going to leave open for now, yeah, Dan?
That's right. We're going to have an arm wrestle and see whether we do Konix Multisystem every week, which is my preference. No, joking aside. All right, okay, good.
Thanks for listening. I've been Retro Marky.
Well, I've been Dan. I still am. Goodbye.
Ciao, ciao.
In the search for the definitive computer simulator game, one name is clearly emerging. Konix Multisystem. Experience the reality. Get behind the wheel of the new Konix Multisystem and you'll really appreciate that powerful 32-bit custom processor. This is real state-of-the-art graphic performance, and even at these speeds, it handles beautifully.
And this is really a display of a lifetime, perfect control over every maneuver, and with over 4,000 different colors to choose from, we're looking at a dazzling graphic display.
Well, have you ever seen anything quite like this? What a powerful machine this is. We're getting the ultimate high performance from its 16-bit microprocessor. And just listen to that. That CD quality sound from the Konix Multisystem. Unbeatable. Seeing and hearing the Konix Multisystem is one thing. Feeling it is another. The control unit gives full tactile feedback, so you can feel the tarmac as you drive. Feel the wings respond as you pull back on the controls. Sense the bite of the tyres as you corner hard into that sharp left-hander. The Konix Multisystem. It's a car, it's a plane, it's a bike in one system. Not only that, but there's a gear shift mounted on the right of the control unit. And unique dual foot pedals that are really responsive for maximum realism. For other combat games, there are fire buttons placed in just the right position. We even include a free Konix Navigator joystick with every multi-system. And all games are on standard 3.5-inch disc drive for real cost effectiveness. But the Konix Multisystem doesn't stop there. If you think the multisystem itself is amazing, the accessories are out of this world. Take your seat for the experience of a lifetime. This is the Konix Multisystem powered chair. It rolls, pitches and yaws just like the real thing. You can't get more realism without actually being there. The TV is mounted on the chair too, so it moves as you move. There's a seat belt for full security and a wide base and low center of gravity for maximum stability. There are styling panels with stereo speakers you can add for CD quality with extra vroom. And for the ultimate in realism, enter your own private world with the optional full-size cover. Added to that, there's a helicopter control stick you can plug in for greater game flexibility. A 12-button keyboard, giving instant control for even the most complex games. And a space-age style light gun for instant on-screen play. It's got real recoil action as you fire. A clip-on hand grip and butt to turn it into a rifle. And it's even got an auto-fire control to get you out of the tightest spots. It all adds up to a world-beating system with software to match. Like the multi-system itself, the software for it is quite literally the best on Earth. The world's top software manufacturers have been commissioned to write software specifically for the Konix Multisystem. And we'll be adding as many as 10 new ones a month. The Konix Multisystem. Experience the reality today.